anybody noticed that I start every single lecture and workshop with, does anybody have any questions before we start? So coursework 1 is now live, and you can have a look at it. It's on Moodle. It's ready to read. If you'd like to start coursework 1, you're welcome to do that. Okay, before we jump into today's topic, I have a special slide. It's about the National Student Survey. So it would be great if everybody could participate in the National Student Survey. If you have any feedback, these slides are available on Moodle. Everybody knows that, right? So you can, if you have any feedback about the university, about your studies, anything, you can provide the feedback on the National Student Survey. Usually what people write, when I look at these student surveys, usually people write, I can't believe how amazing the research methods module is. I love research methods. I wish every module could be this good. If I could take this module more than once, I would. Those are typical comments for the research methods module. Typical feedback. It is a little bit early, but yeah, feel free to add some feedback, give us some feedback about how you think your studies are going on the national students. We do read those. We do read the feedback. Also, you can give me feedback. You don't have to fill out this survey in order to give me feedback. You could just come up to me after class and say, hey Bob, like, can we do this? You can just give me feedback directly. That's also an option. Doesn't have to be through a QR code. And today's workshop, incidentally, is a result of feedback from students. So today's workshop is inspired by student feedback, actually. But before we get into the workshop, I'm just going to mention some of the qualities of good research. Right, last week we defined research. Does anybody remember? And then we defined scientific research. That was the first week. And then we also discussed the peer review process. Does anybody remember that? And now today we're going to talk about good research, or we could say good scientific research. So one of the qualities of good research is that it's original, so it contributes something new. This is not a requirement of your master's thesis, but it is nice. Like to get a distinction, for example, if you're shooting for a distinction, it's good to have something new, something original. This could be testing out a new idea on existing problems, data, or a topic, testing out an existing idea on a new problem, data set, or topic. A lot of research comes from trying to combine two existing ideas into a new hybrid to try to adapt, get the benefits of both approaches. You'll see that that's a very common pattern. Reorganizing or synthesizing new knowledge, doing something faster. So last time I mentioned speeding up a process, so getting a process. I mean, it's kind of an obsession, isn't it, to get things to speed up, right? Everything is faster. Here's a trivia question. Does anybody know what we spend the most time on? Which task do we spend the most time on when interfacing with a computer or a phone? Does anybody happen to know that?
Finding things.
What's your name? Sylvia? Sylvia guessed finding things, searching. Yeah.
Yeah, like how to do.
Any other guesses? Another guess? Typing. Any other guesses? Searching, typing. Those are good guesses. They're not correct, but they're good guesses. I don't know why, like I heard this a long time ago and it just stuck in my head and I notice it every single day. I notice it every single day, multiple times a day, actually. Any other guesses?
Doom scrolling. Doom scrolling.
Scrolling? Is it a third guess?
Just doom scrolling.
Yeah.
On and on.
Doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is another trivia, was only invented a few years ago. I don't remember the exact year, probably something like 2014, 2015. Before that, there was no such thing as doom scrolling. So it's a relatively new invention. The infinite scroll. Before that year, everything had an end. You would scroll until the end, and it wasn't infinite. Any other guesses? Those are all good guesses. They're not correct, but they're good guesses. Probably something I would have guessed too. Waiting. The number one task that we do in front of a computer or phone is just waiting. That's where we spend the most of our time, is just waiting. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you think about it, right? You turn the button on and you wait. You press a button like to launch Teams and you wait for like 5 minutes. Right? If you do a search, which is a good guess, you're not waiting very long, are you? Google returns your search results in like a tenth of a second or something mind-bogglingly quick.
That's not what I meant. I meant when you're searching for a particular functionality on the phone. So where it's
Searching in the interface, yes. Think about how much time you spend just waiting. You spend if you pay attention, you'll discover that you spend quite a lot of time just waiting for things to happen. So back to good research, after getting sidetracked. Identifying flaws and overcoming limitations with existing knowledge. Applying new evidence or techniques to a well-known problem. Applying knowledge from one discipline to another. That's very, very common, by the way. For example, taking some knowledge from mathematics and then trying to implement it in software. Very, very common. When the other way around, by the way. Proving a well-known conjecture or solving an unsolved problem. These are all new approaches. Good research is contextual. That means you have to link whatever you're doing to the previous attempts at doing the same thing. You've demonstrated that you've done your homework. You've looked into the existing solutions. That's what this means. Good research makes links to existing research, to current technologies, and to social, economic, and cultural challenges. It means looking into what has been done before and builds on that. Good research is creative. How can we think of something new? Any ideas about how we can think of something new?
Brainstorm.
Brainstorm? How do you brainstorm?
Just write down everything and think and interesting points.
That's a good answer. Brainstorming. This student said writing everything down. And then what did you say after writing everything down?
Select the interesting.
Your favorite topics. There's a kind of formal process for that. It's called mind mapping. Have you ever heard of that? That's one way. You were going to say something?
It's similar.
Similar.
But I would
Yeah.
just start with what problem you want to solve. Because most of the time we just look at the solution and then we forget what the problem is. So start with the problem and build the solution.
Yep. Looking at previous solutions actually is a very good way to think of something new. Looking at previous improvements. So you can always look at an existing solution and ask yourself some questions like, is there a way to make this process faster? Is there a way to make this process more user-friendly? Is there a way to make this process more memory efficient? Because a lot of processes take up too much memory and too much computing power, right? Is there a way to make the results more accurate? So these are 4 questions that you can ask about any research direction. And then there's another one, a 5th one. Is there a new way to do this? That's the hard one. Like, can you really think of something new? That's very rare that somebody thinks of something really new. Making something 5% more accurate is extremely common. Or making something 10% faster is very, very common. Making something a little bit more user-friendly, very, very common. Making something more memory efficient is very common. Making a process more memory inefficient is even more common than memory efficient, right? Because the memory sizes just keep growing and growing. Those are all very, very common things that are new. But thinking of something really new that's not just incremental is quite unusual. Meditating is a good way to think of something new. Ironically, meditating. Okay, good research is reproducible. And you might remember I mentioned this in the first week about reproducibility. If something is not, this is how truth is spread. The way truth is spread and the way something turns into the truth is by reproducibility. Right? If I say something like, oh, it's possible to throw an orange into space with my hands, you're not going to believe me unless you can reproduce that and say, oh, really? I can throw an orange into space with my bare hands, and then you go outside and try it, right? Or you see if you can find somebody. But if it's reproducible, if a lot of people can start doing that, then it turns into the truth, right? That's how you can decide. But in order to turn into the truth, it has to be reproducible. Does that make sense? So the reader of your research understands it and is convinced by how you arrived at your conclusions. You clearly explain and honestly how you produced your results. Explain how you selected which problems to address and which ones not to address. So this is the key takeaway. Describe your project in enough detail that it can be reproduced by someone else. That's a key takeaway. Unfortunately, or for better or for worse, this is kind of rare. It's kind of rare for somebody to present their research results and be fully reproducible. Does anybody find that sad? It's kind of sad. It's actually bad news. It's a very big, bad side of computer science, actually. It's a part that not many people talk about. Okay, good research is ethical, moral, and benevolent, right? I think that goes without saying. So good research ensures that it doesn't mislead or exploit people. This is why we have those ethics forms to just do a sanity check that everything we're doing is ethical, moral, and benevolent. And good research is usually collaborative. You're usually working with somebody or some people. You're not born knowing how to do research. You're not born knowing what problems are solved and what problems are not solved. So you work with other people that are familiar with this area that you're interested in, that have a good education and background and have been studying the problem and know which problems have been solved and which ones have not been solved. Therefore, it's collaborative. Like you collaborate with your supervisor. You might be collaborating with multiple supervisors, like one from mathematics and one from computer science, for example. Or it could be any academics. It could be an academic and a industry partner. So it's usually collaborative, and it could be with another student too. Yeah. So there's no limit to the options, actually. So it is led as individual work, but it does involve collaboration. Okay, any questions about good research? That formally concludes the passive learning component of today's workshop. Now we're turning into active learning mode. So this is unusual. We're going to look at CVs today. Very, very unusual activity. Has anybody here ever tried to write a CV? Hopefully you all have tried. And by the end of today, you're going to know how to improve your CV massively, because I guarantee you it can be improved. I will bet money on that. So today we're going to form groups of 6 to 8. And in that group, you're going to review the top errors when writing a CV. There's a link to that there. There's also a link on Moodle. There's a link on Teams. And for your convenience, there's a list of the most common errors in the video description for your convenience. You're going to review each group member's CV. And then you're going to identify the errors in the parts of the CV that could be improved. And then you're going to choose one CV from each group to be reviewed by myself in front of the class. So you can send it in an email. I will look at it in front of the class, and then I'll tell you what's wrong with it. If you're like scared, really scared and shaky and trembling and all that stuff, you can anonymize, you can remove the name, if you're scared. How does that sound? Does it sound exciting? So now you're no longer allowed to say, oh, what we did in research methods is not really applicable outside of the module. This is actually changes the course of your life. Your CV partially determines the course of your life. A higher quality CV will result in a higher quality career. A higher quality career results in a higher quality life. So I'm always baffled at how little effort people put into a CV, given that it might be the most important document of your entire life. I can't think of a document that's more important than your CV that determines. Maybe your passport, like it's right up there with your passport, right? Because if somebody takes away your passport, you can't move. So your passport's really important, and your CV is also really, really important. And I'm always surprised at how little effort people put into their CVs, and I'm always surprised at how low quality they are. The ones that I see are generally very, very low quality, and I'm always surprised. So today, we're going to change the direction of the rest of your lives from like going down into the up direction. Sound like fun? Okay, so let's form some groups. Yeah, I'll go around and allocate some groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe 5 work together.